Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for finding time to be with us this afternoon. It is the 28th of March 2022. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, and my name is Miriam Ogutu. And as usual, we're coming to you from Kenya's capital here in Nairobi. And in Diaspora Dispatches, I get to bring us the latest news from across the continent. And we shall start our bulletin this afternoon from Nigeria. And the United States has imposed new sanctions on individuals connected with Nigeria's armed group, Boko Haram. The Treasury Department has announced 6 Nigerian nationals who are found guilty of setting up a Boko Haram cell in the United Arab Emirates to raise funds for fighters in Nigeria have been placed on the sanctions list. With this action, the United States joins the UAE in targeting terrorist financing networks of mutual concern, and the Secretary of the Treasury, Brian Nelson, he said on Friday. And the men identified as Abdurrahman Ado Musa, Salihu Yusuf Adamu, Bashir Ali Yusuf, Mohammed Ibrahim Isa, Ibrahim Ali Al-Hassan, and Suraj Abubakar Mohammed were convicted in the UAE of attempting to send $782,000 US from Dubai to Nigeria. Adamu and Mohammed were sentenced to life in prison for violating UAE anti-terrorism laws, while Musa, Yusuf, Isa and Al-Hassan received sentences of 10 years in prison, followed by deportations. Now, the U.S. officials designated Boko Haram as a foreign terrorist group in 2013, and according to the State Department, the group is responsible for numerous attacks in the northern and northeastern regions of Nigeria, as well as in the Lake Chad Basin in Cameroon, Chad and Niger, that have killed thousands of people since 2009. And separately, the Treasury also designated 5 individuals and 5 entities connected to Myanmar's military. We also know how that has gone on there. All right, and then we shift gears and we move to South Africa. The leader of the anti-migrant protest movement in South Africa, which has gained momentum in recent months, was arrested on Thursday. Police said Nahla Lux Dlamini, a black activist in his 30s, was taken to Johannesburg Central Police Station for questioning. A police spokesperson told the AFP without giving further details. Dlamini is known in his community for parading around in luxurious sports cars. He is also known for his public appearances, almost always wearing military fatigues and a bulletproof vest. The arrest drew criticism from members of his movement who used social networks and social media to threaten to intensify their activities. Since January, demonstrations called to fight for the future of South Africa and against migrant workers have been held regularly in several cities. Protesters have visited shops to demand the foreign employees accused of stealing South Africans' jobs be fired. These rallies have so far led to tension but not violence. South Africa is periodically plagued by xenophobic outbreaks. 62 people were killed in the riots in 2008. Violent clashes broke out in 2015, 2016 and again in 2019. The country has 3.95 million foreigners out of the nearly 60 million inhabitants, according to official statistics. The continent's leading industrial power struggles with 35% unemployment, but attracts many African migrants. And then he head over to Mali, and West African leaders on Friday said they would uphold the regional sanctions imposed on Mali in January after its military leaders said they would stay in power for 4 more years instead of holding an election in February. The regional economic bloc known as ECOWAS made the decision during a summit in Ghana's capital, Accra, where they also discussed the situation in other coup-affected member states, including Burkina Faso and Guinea. The sanctions in Mali suspended most commerce and financial aid to the country and included land and air border closures, which with other countries belonging to ECOWAS. The African Economic and Monetary Union Court of Justice on Thursday ordered the suspension of those sanctions after Mali's leaders filed a legal complaint against them. saying they would severely affect Malians. However, ECOWAS President Jean-Claude Cassibro said after the closed-door meetings that it was the only authority that could lift such sanctions. The sanctions, he said, were imposed and be respected by all countries in the region. He reiterated the ECOWAS leaders wanted an 18 to 24-month timeline to return to the country to civilian rule. The regional leaders on Friday also called for the immediate release of Burkina Faso's former President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, who has been under house arrest in the capital Ouagadougou since Burkina Faso's military seized power in a coup in January. And then we do have a couple of news today from South Sudan, and perhaps that will form the basis of our conversation. And the SPLM in opposition has rejected the presidential order on the unification of command structure of the regular forces. On Friday, President Salva Kiir issued a decree for the unification of the command structure of the National Army and the South Sudan National Police Service. In a statement read out on the national broadcaster SSBC, President Kiir relinquished 3 top security positions to the military wing of the SPLM-IO, including the positions of Inspector General of SSPDF and the Assistant Chief of Defense Forces for moral orientation to SPLA-IO. Kiir also allocated 2 other top positions to South Sudan Opposition Alliance. He further directed the Army and Police Command to implement the order with immediate effect. In response, the main opposition on Saturday claimed the presidential decree was unilateral and a violation of revitalized peace agreement on power sharing. The press release, which bears the signature of Dr. Riek Machar, says the parties have not yet reached an agreement in the ongoing dialogue on unification of command. The unification of command of the armed forces was made as per the provisions of the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. And still staying with South Sudan, the South Sudan Opposition Alliance has called on the Joint Defense Board leadership to appoint a joint committee to investigate the recent clashes in Upper Nile State. The party also urged RJMEC and CTSAM-VM to verify and investigate these violations and bring the perpetrators to book. SSOA condemned the strongest terms the ongoing violent confrontations between SSPDF and SPLA-IO in Greater Upper Nile. It is calling on the conflicting parties to exercise maximum restraint and recommit themselves to the permanent ceasefire as stipulated in Article 2.2, Sub-Article 1 of the Revitalized Peace Agreement. Now, SSOA condemned the individuals who have been facilitating these defections between signatory parties to the Revitalized Peace Agreement. In a press statement signed by Josephine Lagu Yanga, the chairperson of SSOA, called on the Joint Defense Board to investigate ceasefire violations. SSOA urged IGAD and the guarantors to urgently convene a meeting of all parties to the agreement to evaluate the implementation matrix of the whole agreement. I told you we'll stay with South Sudan because you do have a couple of stories. It's been an ongoing, story in South Sudan, the recent misunderstanding, the stakeholders there, the revitalized peace agreement, and, South Sudan security forces on Monday morning withdrew from First Vice President Riek Machar's residence in the capital, Juba. His office has told the BBC. Mr. Machar reported to his office on Monday and was working normally, according to his press secretary, both Baluang. The security forces had been deployed to Mr. Machar's residence on Saturday evening. The Vice President's office is later expected to issue a press statement on the matter. Security officers cordoned off Mr. Machar's house after he had issued a press statement rejecting President Salva Kiir's directive on the formation of the National Army, a key pillar of a peace deal that the pair signed in 2018. Mr. Machar had accused President Kiir of not equally sharing out positions in the military and the police forces as stipulated in the peace deal. President Kiir's office has not commented on the matter yet. And still staying with South Sudan, with growing tension, South Sudan's Vice President Riek Machar says he has asked for help from East African countries gathered in the IGAD bloc, and in particular from Sudan. Machar, the embattled Vice President, says he wants Sudanese head of state and top General Abdel Fattah el-Burhan to come to his aid against President Salva Kiir. Khartoum was indeed one of the guarantors of the South Sudanese peace agreement signed in 2018 after 5 years of civil war. The new development comes as South Sudan's government forces have reportedly surrounded Riek Machar's residence in the capital, Juba. It is not clear if Machar was at home at that time, but as I told you there earlier, they have vacated the premises of the first Vice President Riek Machar. Now on Friday, the former rebel leader asked regional and international leaders to intervene to end renewed fighting in Unity and Upper Nile states, which are considered his strongholds. Clashes between South Sudan's military and forces loyal to Mr. Machar have been reported in various areas for weeks now, threatening a fragile peace agreement between him and President Salva Kiir. The government has not issued any statement whether its soldiers have surrounded the premises. And then we move over to some other news, and a summit bringing Israel together with Egypt and Morocco and 2 other Arab countries is taking place in the Negev desert in Israel. The U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is also taking part in the meeting, which is expected to focus on the revival of the Iran nuclear deal and the war in Ukraine. Foreign ministers from Egypt and the UAE, Morocco and Bahrain have traveled to Israel for the event in a sign of their commitment to a new relationship with Israel. They've condemned the attack on Sunday in Israel, in which 2 police officers were killed. Rwanda now wants additional funding to keep its troops in Mozambique's troubled northern Cabo Delgado region, where they are fighting Islamist militants. A 1,000-strong Rwandan force was deployed to the region last year and has since recaptured many villages and towns from the militants. Rwandan High Commissioner to Mozambique said they had asked the European Union for financial support for the troops to bring the situation in the region under control. He said there were visible improvements in areas recaptured by Rwandan troops. He also said there was no deadline for Rwandan troops' presence in the country. And then we go to Ghana, where the country now has removed the mandatory requirement for face masks to be worn in public. President Nana Akufo-Addo announced the decision on Sunday, citing a sustained drop in COVID infections in Ghana and neighboring countries. The president also scrapped the requirement of negative PCR tests for fully vaccinated travelers arriving in the country through the Kotoka International Airport in Accra from Monday. However, he encouraged Ghanaians to continue observing enhanced hand hygiene and practices and avoid overcrowded places. And then we move over to Zimbabwe, where independent elections observers say the just ended Zimbabwean by-elections were marred by intimidation and vote buying. Results from the poll suggest that the new opposition party Citizens Coalition for Change (CCC), led by Nelson Chamisa, is on course to win most of the 28 parliamentary over the 100 council seats being contested. 3/4 of the by-elections were because of a split within the main opposition, the Movement for Democratic for Change (MDC). While the opposition is celebrating its wins, a result suggests that the ruling ZANU-PF has made some inroads, including in urban areas. It managed to snatch several parliamentary and council seats from the opposition. But independent observer groups like the Zimbabwean Election Support Network said some candidates' conduct amounted to vote buying, including giving out of foodstuffs to voters. And then we go to Burkina Faso, and the security forces have arrested the former speaker a day after he called for the immediate release of ousted President Roch Kabore. Alassane Bala Sakade, who is also the leader of the former ruling party, was arrested by police at his home earlier on Sunday morning. He was released without charge in the evening after hours of interrogation in the capital Ouagadougou. Local broadcaster Radio Omega has reported. Mr. Sakade said that the former president was not under house arrest but in detention due to the difficult conditions he had allegedly been subjected subjected to. The former president was deposed in January and has been held under house arrest since then. The West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS, which has threatened to impose further sanctions on Burkina Faso, has demanded his unconditional release. And then the latest is that from his trip to Israel and the West Bank, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony flies to Morocco and Algeria today. In Morocco, Blinken will meet with his counterpart, Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita. Talks will include the disputed Western Sahara, the former Spanish colony that Trump administration formally recognized as part of Morocco in exchange of Rabat normalizing relations with Israel in December 2020. As part of the groundbreaking Araban Accords, Morocco has also shied away from condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In Algeria, Blinken will see President Abdelmadjid Tebboune and Foreign Minister Ramten Lamamra. Algeria is a leading supplier of natural gas to Europe, playing a crucial role after Russia's invasion of Ukraine last month halted the opening of a new large natural gas pipeline from Russia to Germany. And then we end with some news from the DRC, and hundreds of Congolese have fled into Uganda following rebel attacks on their homes. Officials in North Kivu province say the M23 fighters stormed Chanzu and Runyoni villages. A Congolese army base was reportedly attacked. Eyewitnesses say there has been fierce fighting between the rebels and the government troops. The M23, which is mainly made up of ethnic Tutsis, used to be a major fighting force in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, seizing the regional capital Goma in 2012. It later engaged in talks with the Congolese government, but says its demands have never been met. The UN had previously accused Uganda and Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels. All right, so that is the end of our news bulletin this afternoon. And yeah, just from where we just stopped there, the UN had previously accused Uganda and Rwanda of supporting the M23 rebels. And Uganda right now is in the Democratic Republic of Congo, trying to help the government of Felix Tshisekedi to stabilize that part, the restive part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But there hasn't been any changes, and even our own army the KDF is is in that place, and they're trying to help in fighting these rebels. But I don't know. Nothing much has really changed, because every now and then, every week, every other day, we're having reports here of people being attacked and renewed violence and things like that. So I don't know what is it, they're doing there, or how much, or they're still strategizing. I'm not sure. But if Uganda has been accused of sponsoring and supporting and aiding the M23, and Uganda is still the same country that is there trying to pacify and help, DRC pacify that place. It beats all logic, but apparently that they're there to help. So let's see how, maybe it's still too early in the game, so let me just wait and see how that will work out. And now the ex-ruling party leader in Burkina Faso has been arrested because over the weekend, he spoke and he said, hey, could you release the former president, Roch Kabore? Remember, after the ousting of the president in January, we've not known so much about his whereabouts, and so his party leader was demanding to know his whereabouts and what's really happening. And he said that the president is not even under house arrest. He seems to be subjected to something that is equivalent to being on detention, because the conditions that he's being held on are not very good. So he was demanding that, the army junta should release the former president, which I think they should, because why are you holding him? You've already ousted him from power. Like, what is your end game? What do you want? Do you want to charge him the same way they charged, Omar al-Bashir after removing him in Sudan? Or what really do you want? Because the army has been very mum about this matter and about the whereabouts of the former president. And I think ECOWAS has been making similar demands, the ECOWAS leadership. And as I told you there earlier, they met, and they made other statements after meeting over the issues and over the recent coups that have happened in the West African countries, that including Burkina Faso and also in Mali, where they continue to put more sanctions. You know, Mali had gone to the regional court there to try to challenge the junta, to try to challenge these sanctions that were imposed on them by ECOWAS. I mean, if you're part of a bloc, an economic bloc like ECOWAS, like East African Community, like IGAD, like SADC, there are rules and regulations in which countries are there to, treaties and all that. You ratify these, you know, rules of engagement that you want to be part of. So if you violate any of those, then they do have a responsibility to meet you with the equal penalty that, you know, on what you have done. So ECOWAS, of course, suspended Mali from the regional bloc, the same way they've suspended Burkina Faso, I think. And also, African Union has suspended these two countries. Has African Union suspended Burkina Faso? I think yes. So they don't want, they just want to have their cake and eat it. No, we will remove the president and then we'll leave, we will not agree to you know, the a nearer date for the you know, elections that will lead to the country having a civilian you know, leader. But also we will not do that. But also we don't want those sanctions you're putting on us. You can't. You have to choose whatever it is you want and stick to it. If you don't want to follow the rules and regulations in ECOWAS and you violated that and you violated your constitution, then you can't have your cake and eat it. If that is the way you've chosen, you do not want to have an election as soon as possible, because ECOWAS leaders were, you know, wanted them to have an election at least in the next 2 years. But the junta in Mali has said, you know, no, the nearest elections we can promise that we will have is after 5 years. And, you know, the ECOWAS leadership was adamant. In the meantime, what are you planning to be doing in these 5 years of transition? Because the people of Mali, they were used to a civilian rule. So now all of a sudden they have the military in power. And then we do also have these other outside and external influences that we've seen play out there in Mali. And, you know, Mali is a very important country as far as, you know, fighting extremist groups in the Sahel region is concerned. So it being removed in ECOWAS and not actively you know, participating and coordinating with the rest of the countries has left a gap there that perhaps will bring new challenges as far as fighting extremism in the Sahel region is concerned. But the ECOWAS leadership has stuck to their guns, and they've said, regardless of that move that Mali took by going to the African Economic and Monetary Union Court of Justice, and of course that court ruled on Thursday ordering the suspension of those sanctions after Mali's leaders filed a legal complaint against them, saying they would severely affect Malians. Now, if you understand that these sanctions would severely affect Malians, then why don't you just do what you're supposed to do? And ECOWAS said no, you know, the buck stops with them, regardless of what that court has said. The decision to whether to suspend the sanctions on Mali still remains with them, so it does not matter what that court said. Then I wonder, why do we even need this court in the first place? But maybe the courts did not look at the merits you know, of this case. I don't know. So Mali now there wants to have its cake and eat it, the junta. So it's quite unfortunate. And of course, US has put sanctions to 6 Nigerians for aiding Boko Haram. That is also another story. But also, there's something that I wanted us to look at. The unfolding events in South Sudan, which I think must be worrying the stakeholders in South Sudan, because from last week when SPLM-IO, I think, you know, walked out on a security meeting because they're saying their forces are being attacked in their cantonment, you know, sites by the other forces. And so that has went ahead and created what seems to be a crisis, and the reports that have been coming. And after that, and the things that, you know, the steps that are being taken by the government and the things that we've seen unfold there in South Sudan, I would want to urge IGAD to not wait until things are out of hand, because there's things, you know, a conflict in South Sudan is not new. because even right now as you speak, majority of the places is restive. But something perhaps that we might not want to see, because for a moment there, after they agreed to work again in February of 2020, I believe, there was a renewed hope that, this revitalized peace agreement that they signed before, and these are the agreements they've signed before, maybe this will be a good start for them to start implementing that, perhaps will save the peace process that has remained fragile in South Sudan. But since then, not much has happened that we can write home about. And with these new developments, I think they should be worrying. And it should worry, the stakeholders. It should worry the people who are supporting this peace process in South Sudan. It should worry, the people of South Sudan. And it should particularly worry the leaders, because these are not the kind of reports that the people of South Sudan really want to hear. And so the SPLM in opposition has rejected the presidential order on the unification of command structure of the regular forces. And, Dr. Riek Machar's side is saying some of these major changes that President Salva Kiir made, he did that unilaterally. He did not consult with him or other stakeholders, and so he rejected. And in a statement read out to the national broadcaster SSBC, President Kiir relinquished 3 top security positions to the military wing of the SPLM-IO, including the positions of the Inspector General of SSPDF and the Assistant Chief of Defense Forces for morale orientation to the SPLA-IO. Kiir also allocated 2 top positions to the South Sudan Opposition Alliance. So, he's not happy. Riek Machar and his side, they're not happy with these changes that President Salva Kiir made, and he made that pronouncement. So after that, what now then followed was that security forces on Monday morning, I think apparently there were security forces that were that took charge of, Riek Machar's home, residence in Juba, that perhaps caused some panic, and so in the Monday morning they withdrew. That happened over the weekend after he rejected those new changes in the security apparatus of the country by President Salva Kiir. And so Monday morning, they withdrew from the Vice President Riek Machar's residence in the capital, Juba. His office confirmed with the BBC. So I think that is good, because I think even their presence there was beginning to cause some level of tension, I suppose. And of course, the security forces had been deployed to Mr. Machar's residence on Saturday evening. Okay, so the Vice President's office is expected to make a press conference over this matter. And now we are learning that Dr. Riek Machar is reaching out to Al-Burhan, the military leader in Sudan, for help. And with the growing tensions, South Sudan's Vice President Riek Machar says he has asked for help for East African countries gathered in the IGAD bloc, particularly in Sudan. And we know that Sudan has been the guarantor and the mediator of the peace process that has been going on in South Sudan. And we know also that South Sudan has been the guarantor and mediator of the peace process that has been ongoing in Sudan. And President Salva Kiir seems to be doing a wonderful job when it comes to the talks and his mediation efforts in Sudan. We've seen rebels coming together with the government and reaching deals and all that. Not everybody has agreed to come to the table, but President Salva Kiir seems to be doing a fantastic job in Sudan as far as that is concerned. But at home, I don't know if it's Al-Burhan who is not doing very well in his mediation here in South Sudan, or Charity has just refused to begin at home here in South Sudan. So it has been a bit confusing. So this renewed conflict and this renewed attention that we've been seeing brewing, I think if it is not brought under control as soon as possible, we don't have to see anything spill out of control in South Sudan. I think the Pope is preparing to come to South Sudan in June. These are not the stories I think he wants to come and meet him when he arrives in South Sudan. So I think the leadership of South Sudan in both sides, the stakeholders, they need to come together for the love of God, and for the love of the people, and for the love of the country, and just put these other things aside and say enough is enough now. All right? Because all you see in all these stories is fighting about positions, about who takes what, about who was removed from what, about who has been given what. It has nothing, in all this, even this renewed conflict, it has nothing to do with, okay, so what is best for the people of South Sudan? I wish they would be disagreeing on matters like that. Like, when do we start the process of taking our people from the refugee camps, for example? I want them to be talking about things like this and to be having arguments about important things like this, okay? But from the start, even when you look at the peace agreement, that is what it focused on, all right? It's just who will get what, which side will get what, and then who will be what. Nothing to do with the general public. And that is the sad part. So over and over here, when Dr. Matanga says that this peace process in South Sudan, the foundations are flawed. Indeed, they were flawed. They were not people-centered. They were not really centered on what the public, what the citizens of South Sudan really wants. But it was to satisfy egos. It was for positions. It was for people who thought it's their time now to do whatever it is they want to do as far as leadership in South Sudan is concerned. So it is a sad state of reality. So I don't know if Al-Burhan will be the right person to bring into the scene. I think this issue in South Sudan, as much as Sudan has been the guarantor, has been the mediator, but I would like for the people of South Sudan, I would like for President Salva Kiir to be in control here as the head of state of South Sudan and invite the rest of everybody else to the table. But the problem with that is everybody else feels they're equal. They're equal to the president. They're equal. They feel like they're equal. So even when President Salva Kiir is doing certain things as the head of state, they say no. But I guess that was part of the revitalized peace agreement, that before you make important decisions, you have to consult. So sometimes it feels like I'm the head of state, so I have a right, I can do this and this and the other. But others feel different. But I think as the head of state, this will be the time that he would show leadership and call everybody to the table and say, okay, we've seen where we've been as a country in 2016. You remember? We've seen where we've been as a country in 2013, just 2 years after South Sudan got its independence. That has not served this country very well. So before this simmering conflict here, there have been some deaths that have been reported. There have been some shootings that have been reported. There have been, so before it gets worse than what it already is, I think President Salva Kiir needs to show leadership, bring everybody to the table by themselves. At this point, I think South Sudan leadership needs to find a way of solving their issues by themselves. At the end of the day, they are the leaders of South Sudan. Having a mediator, is good. But I don't think Al-Burhan, he has his own problems there in Sudan, I'm telling you. I don't think right now South Sudan is even on the top list of, the things he wants to deal with right now. They're having their own issues back at home in Sudan. So I don't think he will be the right party to bring in right now. But I would love perhaps for IGAD leadership. Of course, some countries in IGAD have been accused of being part of the people who are fueling the war in South Sudan. But IGAD as a body of the East African community should reach out, should convene an urgent meeting and address this simmering tension, this conflict that has started brewing before it blows over, before it becomes much serious and we start seeing South Sudan more destabilized. I think they need to convene a meeting as soon as possible so that the issue of South Sudan is discussed and a solution is gotten very, very fast. Otherwise, I think these reports that are coming from South Sudan, I think it's something that perhaps should worry us, or perhaps should make some stakeholders, just act quickly so that everybody can be brought to the table and people can talk. Because when people talk, when they're able to talk, things halfway you will solve part of the problem. So we need them to start talking and start engaging for the better good of the country and the people of South Sudan. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogotu. Enjoy the rest of your day and bye-bye for now.